What's going on, guys? Based on the comments that we've gotten from one of the last videos on the 4 ways to get your biggest bench, I wanted to break it down for the squat. The squat is slightly different than building a bench press, but we're going to follow the same sort of pattern here and give you 4 distinct principles or techniques or whatever you want to call them to help you get the biggest squat that you possibly can. First and foremost, just like with any lift, the first thing we're going to focus on is the technique. And how do we do that? Just like what we did with our bench press, in order to get technique better with our squat, we need to start slowing things down. We need to start focusing in on specifically the style of squat that you do. So first, do you squat high bar? Do you squat low bar? Are you competitive? Are you not competitive? You need to ask yourself these questions because it all varies, it all differs on how you attack training your squat for technique purposes. If you're a new person that just wants to get a bigger squat for whatever reason, you can start with goblet squats, you can start with kettlebell squats, you can start with front squats, high bar squat, it doesn't really matter. But if I'm talking to a competitive lifter that wants to get the biggest squat they possibly can, then the only way that I would really have you do this is to get into your competition stance and do pause squats or tempo squats. And what I mean by pause or tempo is I want you to pause the rep in a position where you have to really focus on your positioning, focus where your weight is distributed, the sensations that you feel in your body, and really making sure that you're locking that form and that technique down. What you'll see a lot with newer lifters and those that are not nearly as competent in their movement is they will squat down, bounce right back up out of the hole, and not even think about the movement at all. I want you to slow things down, and the best way to do this is, like I said, with pause squats, pausing either in the hole, pausing halfway up, or pausing in the position that you're the weakest, or really slow eccentrics. I'm talking 4 or 5 seconds, focusing on that positioning, focusing on how to execute the squat. So I don't feel like changing the bar here. So we're gonna use this giant ass camber bar that we used this weekend to kind of demonstrate the 2 different types. So, pause squats. What we want to do, we want to make sure everything's locked in as it should be. Core is nice and braced, nice and tight, and you're just slowly descending in the hole, pausing at the position that you find that you're the weakest. Why we do this is that so we can kind of correct. We can auto-correct where we're feeling that pressure, or where we're feeling that sort of binding up, and then you come straight up. Now, the other way of doing these is slower eccentrics, but it's the same idea. It allows you to think about the movement, allows you to think about the positionings that you're putting yourself in. So if I'm coming down just like I did, nice and slow, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up, right? Pretty simple, fairly easy here. Another way of doing this is to do your competition style squat to a box to control the height, to control the position, and again, to put yourself in a position where you can think about how you move, think about your technique, and really focus on locking in really good form so you can be as efficient as you possibly can. Just like with bench, number 2, principle number 2, tactic number 2, whatever you want to call it, is hypertrophy. Getting bigger, stronger legs, utilizing machines such as this is a great way to help build your competition squat or your free squat. One of the best ways to do this is to use a hack squat if you have access to one and go at your competition stance. So if you're a closer squatter, bring your feet in. If you're a wider squatter, bring your feet out. But also another good way of building that hypertrophy and that muscle and that strength is to do the opposite stance. If you're a closer, more narrow squatter, bring those feet out a little bit. If you're more wide, bring those feet in. But the idea is simple. Use machines, leg extensions, hack squats, leg press, Bulgarian split squats. Just build more muscle on your legs, and you're gonna find over the course of time, the stronger and bigger those wheels are, the easier it is to squat. Everybody's favorite exercise, Bulgarian split squats. How is that going to help your squat? Well, one of the biggest issues that people have with their squat is a lack of stability. How we build up that stability over time is putting more unilateral or single leg work in. It can be a lunge, it can be a split squat, it can even be back extension with only one leg. Just unilateral work overall is going to help you build that stability around the hip, build that stability around the feet and the ankles, and help you really maximize the amount of force that you can drive with both feet in the squat. One of the best examples or adages that I've heard at coaching over the last year is if you can't stand on one leg, you shouldn't really squat on two. The reasoning behind this is that with both feet on the ground and you're trying to drive as much force as you possibly can, you don't really know if one side is putting more force in the ground than the other, or it can hide and mask a lot of instability that you may have. One-legged exercises like these will help bring to the surface those weaknesses and deficiencies from one side to the other. And finding them out in a single leg exercise is far better than finding them out in a bilateral exercise, because normally what happens, those deficiencies show up as injuries. People shift to the side and all of a sudden blow a meniscus, they pop something in their hip, it's all bad news. So start incorporating more single leg movements into your training and you'll find that your two-footed bilateral squat starts going way up. Last but not least, after you've worked on your technique, you've worked on your stability, you've built a little bit of muscle, now we can start kind of putting a little bit more emphasis on overloading the movement through its range of motion. So how do we do that? Chains, right? Chains, bands, any sort of accommodating resistance. Not only does it look really, really cool, but it also acts to help overload the portion of the lift where you're the strongest. So for beginners, I wouldn't necessarily jump too quickly into bands and chains because there's a certain learning curve to it. But the purpose that we have for intermediate lifters or those who've been lifting for a little while is to give a heavier stimulus at the top where you're the strongest and actually deload some of that weight at the bottom where you're the weakest. This will teach you that out of the hole of the squat where most people fail, right? You need to continue pressing your feet into the ground, continue driving that force straight into the bar as hard as you can. We use bands and chains a lot here at Elite, obviously, and you should too. Check out elitefts.com for all your bands and chain needs. But they are really, really beneficial, especially if you're trying to increase your squat, increase your bench, increase anything you do, really. But a couple words to the wise when it comes to these. Make sure they're set up correctly. Make sure that they are in a position where they're actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. We have a bunch of videos on how to set up chains, how to set up bands all over Elite FTS on our YouTube. What we'll do is we'll link a few down below for you guys if you want to start incorporating bands and chains, because frankly, I'm kind of sick of seeing the crazy concoctions you guys do where the chains aren't doing anything and the bands aren't doing anything and you just look silly. So there you have it. 4 very distinct principles that you can implement into your training to get the biggest squat possible for yourself, your training partners, or the people that you work with. So guys, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you like, subscribe, do all the things, click all the links, buy all the stuff from elitefts.com. Thank you very much, and we will see you in the next one.